A Springfield mother said she returned from a trip to see her dad to find her baby daughter's leg twitching. Soon the twitching began to affect the baby's entire left side. She took the infant to 3 different hospitals that day, and scans later showed the baby had a skull fracture. Prosecutors say the father shook the baby while his wife was out of town. A 3-year-old Springfield girl was taken to the hospital by her grandmother. The child was found to be suffering multiple sores, abrasions, and wounds. Court records show the child was taken into custody and hospitalized to be treated for various injuries. 6 other children were also removed from the same home.
Interviews by Springfield police allege a 3-year-old girl had been tied to a chair and thrown downstairs by her mother's boyfriend. She was at times allegedly kept in a part of the house the other children called the hole, locked in a cage.
The defendant smothered 2-month-old Caden to death with a pillow over the course of an hour. After she killed him, the defendant did laundry, cleaned, and redressed the child before calling 911. Initially, the defendant told police that the baby had rolled over and suffocated while she was out of the room.
Blair was sentenced to prison for 10 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections for statutory sodomy in the first degree, attempted statutory sodomy in the first degree, and child molestation in the first degree, all for crimes against one of his granddaughters.
Those 5 separate stories of abuse all took place here in Greene County, Missouri. For years, this county has led the state in reports of child abuse. Over 72,000 reports were made just 2 years ago. That includes neglect, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. In an otherwise peaceful, safe part of the world, what's happening to some children here truly is a crime. It is apparent that for some kids, the most dangerous place in southwest Missouri is the home. Some of what you're about to see and hear may be too intense for some viewers. Here's reporter Savannah Steffen.
Just when you think you've seen it all, something new happens. A new case comes across your desk, and you realize that you really haven't seen it all.
Unless there are certain interventions, there can be really lifelong complications from any kind of abuse or neglect.
All of our kids that come to us have humongous behavior issues and emotional issues.
It is such a silent epidemic.
Child abuse is one of our county's darkest problems, with no easy answers. Slowly, we are starting to have more conversations about the abuse suffered by our children, from infants all the way through teenagers. There are dedicated people on the front lines battling it every day. People like Barbara Brown Johnson, head of the Child Advocacy Center.
It's such an unpleasant topic that I think we were accustomed to not talking about it.
Well, it's not comfortable.
It is not comfortable, particularly to talk about sexual abuse. And as I always tell groups when I go out to talk, if we hide our heads in the sand, we help people hurt kids, because that's what they bank on. They bank on us not wanting to talk about this, not wanting to learn, what does a perpetrator look like, not wanting to know how are different ways that we can spot, someone who abuses a child or an abused child.
For over 20 years, the Child Advocacy Center has been the hub of child abuse forensic investigations in Greene County. It is a safe, easy place for kids to talk about difficult, frightening things. Before it opened, families would have to see numerous agencies, and children would have to repeat their stories of abuse over and over. Because of the CAC, that rarely happens anymore.
Everybody comes to one place at the same time, and in this instance in Springfield, it's in a house. Now, it's a great big old house, but it's in a house, so it's not a sterile police station. We don't have bars on the windows. Nobody, we don't have guns and badges and all those things.
A lot of things talked about here are not pleasant. Forensic interviewers like Ashley Weaver use research-based methods to get to the truth of what happened. She has interviewed kids as young as 2.5 years old, all the way up to 18. Her training and compassion are important to the process.
If you know that you can just be a little bit of their life to help them out, or be that bridge for the adults to believe what they're saying and understand that oh, that does make sense on what they said, or oh, that matches up with what mom said. I mean, if you just even make that connection or help them out just a little bit, then you've done your job.
Do you get kids in here that might lie about what they've been doing or what's happened to them?
Oh yeah, we always testify in court, do kids lie? Of course they do. Do adults lie? Of course they do. But we know that statistics show that less than 2% of kids actually lie about abuse.
A multidisciplinary team made up of Children's Division workers, law enforcement, and juvenile officers can hear the same story at the same time, thanks to a special setup here at the CAC.
Older kids are interviewed in this room using a two-way mirror,
While investigators watch and listen from the other side.
the forensic interviewers wear an earpiece so they can receive questions from the other room.
This is our we call our overflow interview rooms.
Younger kids are also interviewed here. Cameras send a live feed to investigators nearby as Ashley uses another tool to gather information, anatomical dolls.
And we use an anatomical doll if a child is having problems talking about what's happened to them. We'll use them if a child maybe doesn't have the words. If a child is very, very young and they don't understand, they can't tell us what's happened to them, they can only show us with the dolls what's happened to them. Well, where were your hands at? Well, I put them back here. And so that showed bent over the, it gave validity to what he was saying. I'm bent over the bed. Mommy told me to bend over the bed. I put my hands back here to block it, and that's why I have, the cuts or lacerations across the hand. So yeah, we use them for physical, we use them for witness, we use them for sexual, so you use them for a lot of different things.
There's a hat.
There are also kid-friendly physical exam rooms with plenty of images in color. It's where safe or sexual assault forensic exams take place.
On site, we have specially trained nurse practitioners and medical assistants whose job it is to do a head-to-toe physical on the child and to look for evidence of abuse or neglect. So for instance, if it's a sexual abuse exam, then if the child allows, we will take a look at the genitals and see if there is any evidence of any recent rape or anything of that nature, or sexually transmitted disease.
Before any child is interviewed or examined at the CAC, there has to be an official investigation. Often that means county investigators are reacting to a hotline call from a mandated reporter, someone required by law to notify authorities if they suspect abuse or neglect. In Missouri, the most common mandated reporter is a school official, such as a teacher, counselor, or administrator. Health professionals, social workers, and foster parents are also mandated reporters, who are expected to protect kids. Making a hotline call to this number, answered in Jefferson City, can lead to an official investigation in any county in the state. The hotline is operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In 2012, the state of Missouri received over 62,000 calls, reporting more than 92,000 children as possible abuse victims. Crystal Montiel and Tabitha Aylshire are investigators for the Greene County Children's Division. When the call is referred to them here in Springfield, they are on the clock.
Whenever we do get these reports that are generated, we have a limited time frame of when we can go out and see the child and verify that that child is safe. And that could be anywhere from 3 hours to 72, depending on what the allegations of the report are. And so it can be very hectic to get these reports in and try to get out and see the family and verify safety of these children within your time frame, because usually it's more than one report a day that you're getting.
Investigators say they always hope to keep the children and their families together. But when they visit homes where abuse has possibly occurred, it's not always clear-cut.
How do you draw the line between, okay, this parent was disciplining their child, but no, this parent was abusing their child?
When we conclude a case involving physical abuse, one of the questions that we have to answer was this injury caused during administering punishment? And then another question was it accidental? I've had circumstances where it may have been a typical spanking, but the child moved or something happened. We've even had children that their parents may have grabbed them and injured them more than they thought that they did. You have to take into account what the parent says, but what the child said. I think there's a lot of misconception about, oh, you can't spank your child, we're gonna come and get you. That's not it. And we do take into consideration that parents have to discipline their kids.
Parents also have to provide food, clothing, and shelter for their kids. Sometimes they can't, sometimes they won't. neglect is all too common.
We're not talking just a little messy or some clutter or some things on the floor. Unsanitary is very, very filthy. Roaches usually, we can see just lots of infestations besides roaches. Feces on the floor, urine on the floor, lots of different things.
The most common type of abuse is neglect. It can also be, sometimes people find this very surprising, it can also be one of the most damaging to a child.
Abusers are often confronted first by law enforcement. Recently retired Springfield Police Sergeant Mark Deeds now patrols Ozark schools for the Christian County Sheriff's Department. His last 4 years on the job in Springfield, he was over the unit that looked into crimes against children.
Depending upon what we as law enforcement find in the home will kind of dictate the direction that we take at that point. We may have to take emergency custody of the children if we find that the living conditions are not appropriate, if we find that there's physical abuse, if we see bruising on the children, if we find a meth lab, if mom and dad are being arrested, if the guardians are being arrested, we're going to take that child into protective custody, and law enforcement has the legal right and authority to do.
5 detectives working under Deeds were responsible for 30 cases each every month.
And so that's 150 cases that any given time that they would have open that they were working on. So anytime that it involves children being assaulted or being hurt, it's too frequent.
So many crimes against children here in our own backyard, but there is something else in our backyard that plays a key role in child abuse. So many times when authorities show up to investigate a case, they find drugs and alcohol, and adults unable to handle their own lives, let alone the lives of their children.
Anywhere there is lots of drug use, but in particular meth, there is also lots of sexual abuse.
We would see drug abuse and drug use in the majority of our homes. We saw a lot of our perpetrators, they themselves were drug users.
It's kind of the perfect storm. Lots of rural areas, quite a bit of poverty in this region, and high drug use, and in particular meth. So I think we're kind of unique in that way. Lots of things exist in these homes behind closed doors that most community members have no idea that exist.
Some of these kids know firsthand what happens behind closed doors. They are attending Freeway Ministries on a Saturday night, sponsored by Crossway Baptist Church. Just downstairs, their parents are getting valuable life lessons. That's important because many of the adults in this audience spend their days in halfway houses, homeless shelters, and even jail cells. This service lets them stay connected with their families once a week. The person leading the service is John Stroop.
I can call them out on their junk. I can call them knuckleheads. I can tell them quit wasting their lives, quit being deadbeats, and they don't put a wall up on me because I've been there.
Stroop did prison time himself and doesn't mince words about what drug users are doing to the kids around them.
A drug addict or a drug dealer are the same as a child abuser or a child molester, and I'll tell you why. One reason is because they take from a kid what they can never get back again. They take their parents and they take their childhood. I've seen kids who've been neglected, abandoned, mistreated, beaten. I know kids that have grown up in a home to where mom and dad runs out of the money. They sell their food stamps. So guess what? There's no food. They use their electric bill money and their rent money to buy drugs. Guess what? You don't have nowhere to live. The most important thing is getting high. And the other most important thing is how am I going to get the money to get high? The child is not a concern anymore.
At the Boys and Girls Town in Springfield, the child is the concern. The kids who live here temporarily come from abusive homes and horrible circumstances. Most have developed behaviors that have them one step away from juvenile detention or a psychiatric hospital. What they find here is pretty simple and pretty important.
Love, unconditional love, and then undo a lot of things that they've learned and teach them what it means to be a healthy individual.
Stephanie Luciani works with a cabin of girls that often don't know how to process the abuse they've suffered.
We have girls that cut, self-harm. We have girls that are physically aggressive. We have girls that just will do their very best to make you feel as worthless as possible. The child literally is incapable of having a normal, healthy relationship with any man. So they learn things like love is only expressed through like sexuality, or it could be reversed. I can't trust a man or be affectionate to a man ever.
That is what abuse suffered when she was in elementary school did to Jane. Happy and enjoying her childhood, until one day when she and her family were visiting her grandfather.
I remember being on his lap, and he just kind of held me tightly in the living room, actually. So there were people just in the next room. There were people passing in and out of the living room. And he just kind of put his hand up my shorts. I was wearing pajamas, and fondled me.
Molested by a man who was a church and community leader, Jane found it impossible to tell anyone because she didn't think they would believe her, so she kept it all inside.
I really struggled for a long time when I was younger. I remember doing things like just sitting in my closet, just by myself, because I felt safe there.
It was a one-time incident for Jane, but it was traumatic. It wasn't until she sought therapy years later while she was in college that she could crawl out of that dark place that her grandfather had put her in.
Being around men, pretty much any older man, was unbearable.
Abuse has lasting effects, and keeping it bottled up almost never works.
When things happen, you really should talk about it, because if you don't, it's just devastating. It can be really devastating.
Jane has a family of her own now, and she raises them with an awareness of something she learned a long time ago.
Even the best of people can turn out to be the worst.
The Victim Center on Boonville provides free of charge help and hope that any person, man, woman, or child will need in the aftermath of a violent or sexual crime. They have 70 victim advocates standing by, ready to assist. Since the abuse victims often don't feel comfortable contacting law enforcement, this is a place they can find hope and support.
We are here to be, if nothing else, their friend, and to be that person that can support them through those difficult situations. We're a safe place. We can come and we can talk to kids and teens and adults, and we can say, you know what, you're not alone.
Feeling alone and hopeless, this 20-year-old we'll call Chris suffered abuse at the hands of his father, then his mother, at a young age. He didn't know about the Victim Center, but he knew firsthand about a life that seemed like one long nightmare for him and his 3 siblings.
It started out with just my biological dad. He would force us to watch porn. He would make us do stuff with each other, do stuff with him, and then he got our biological mom involved. She was the type of person that just went along with whatever was going on. After the abuse, whether it was physical, mental, emotional, or sexual, he would read from the Bible saying, this is our fault. We were bringing it on ourselves because we are sinning.
Chris suffered abuse as long as he can remember. He eventually got away from his biological parents, but the scars are there forever, and so is guilt.
Most teens, for some reason, feel like I should have been able to stop it, or I should have been able to protect my brother or sister, or I should have been able to stop my dad or the neighbor or whoever the offender was.
I could have cared less if all the abuse happened to me. I would have preferred that. But to hear my sister scream in the other room when it was happening, or to find her crying in her bedroom afterwards, just tore me up.
Chris recalls going into his drunken father's bedroom, ready to end the abuse once and for all.
I held my biological dad's shotgun twice to his head and a knife to his throat 3 different times while he was asleep. And I could have ended it and stopped the abuse from my siblings. Yeah, I was never actually able to do it.
Chris admits he acted out for years. Shoplifting, stealing, getting into fights at school, depression and suicidal thoughts, and even cutting himself. It took a lot of therapy to get him to a surprising place in regard to his abusive parents.
I feel like if I deserve a second chance, then they deserve a second chance.
Chris's life has gotten on track for the most part. He got into college and says he no longer thinks of suicide and is looking forward to the future. But a teenage girl we'll call Beth has had trouble doing that after the physical abuse suffered at the hands of her mother.
I don't remember what I did, but she had slammed me on my bed and she started choking me. One time I made her mad. She hit me and gave me a fat lip. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left.
Beth lost her virginity at 16, and that's when her mom became abusive, both physically and verbally.
She still calls me a whore and slut, and I still don't live with her. And she still calls me those names. Like, that messes up with your head. Honestly, does that really prove that your mom loves you? If she's willing to call you a whore, slut, skank, anything like that?
The abuse Beth suffered contributed to a diagnosis often associated with soldiers after a battle, post-traumatic stress disorder.
I have PTSD. I, on occasion, wet the bed. And I'm 19 years old.
It's important to note that both of our young victims suffered abuse from family members. That's not unusual. Child abusers usually find their victims in the next room.
The most common perpetrator of child abuse, all kinds of child abuse, is the biological parent. Bar none, hands down, across the nation, not just in Springfield. This is national and international statistics.
And there is an even more specific profile experts are aware of.
The average child molester is a white male, ages 27 to 38, married with 2 children. Do you know anybody like that?
Brandy Bartell, like other professionals in this field, has seen plenty of victim blaming through the years. And she says it's time to stop asking how young people could put themselves in such vulnerable positions. Instead, it's time for the community to take a different view.
How dare somebody take advantage of that teenager who was maybe not able to make good decisions for themselves? How dare that person violate a child who is helpless and cannot protect themselves? How dare that adult break the law?
We pay way more attention in our state and in every state to what the big people need, and only this much attention to what the little people need. And call me crazy, I think it needs to be flipped.
Once abuse is determined and the legal system gets involved, it may mean a child has to go to court to testify against a parent or loved one. Can you imagine how hard that must be? There is one organization that does everything they can to make it a little easier for the kids involved. They will tell you they have a passion for 2 things, the safety of children and bikes.
BACA stands for Bikers Against Child Abuse. It's an international organization, well organized and very focused. They will do whatever it takes to protect children who have been abused.
We feel as though children should be in a safe environment. There's no reason for a child to ever be in fear, so that's why we're here, so that children can enjoy their life like they ought to.
We will stand guard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, whatever it takes to make that threat go away or until that threat goes away. No one will get between us and that child. It just won't happen. That kid will not be abused again.
We show up in mass, we show up as a chapter, we show up in motorcycles, obviously. As you can imagine, if you see something like that walking into or riding into your neighborhood, into your street, certainly sends a message to not only the perpetrator, but also all the parties involved with that we are already a part of that child's life.
And their presence certainly makes a statement.
Most times we are also with them inside the courtroom, and they have a view of us across the room that gives them a sense of safety.
You know, you get sick of hearing about these things. So you got 2 choices. You can sit on the sofa and watch it on TV and say, oh, that's a terrible thing, or you can get up off the sofa and do something about it.
In February, Baca and 10,000 people from Springfield and the surrounding area did do something about it. They came together to support a family devastated by the ultimate abuse. 10-year-old Haley Owens was abducted during broad daylight, sexually assaulted, and then murdered. A suspect was arrested within hours and awaits trial. But on this night, outrage turned to love and support as a community fed up with crimes against children stood together in sorrow.
Being a mom and a foster mom, as a mom, you want to protect your kids, and as a foster mom, you sign on to protect kids. So it really breaks my heart.
I'm heartbroken. It's just an atrocity. I mean, that this could happen. I'm here to show the community support for the family.
Does it hit kind of close to home?
Too close. My spirit's hurt. My body's angry. This is too close.
I think it's fantastic that something that was spawned out of hate and perversion just, was turned into love and a huge outreach from the city. So.